Welcome to the second episode of It's Been Said podcast. I'm your host, SAI Executive Director Lisa Remy. Each show is dedicated to conversations on leadership as we further SAI's mission to support, encourage, and develop Iowa's educational leaders and learners. In this episode, hear from the National Association of Elementary School Principals immediate past president and SAI past president Paul Wenger on the qualities of best leaders, how to create emotionally healthy organizations, and advice he gave when someone close to him chose to pursue the principalship. Paul has been a dedicated school leader for over 22 years. He began his first principalship in Iowa in 2000 at Edco Elementary School in Colesburg, before joining Jordan Creek Elementary School in West Des Moines from 2015 to 2022. During his tenure, Paul has also been committed to serving the profession at large and has been an active, engaged member of NAESP. His roles have included serving on the membership committee, nominating committee, as federal relations coordinator, as state representative, and as director of Zone 6 on the NAESP board. Paul also served as the NAES president during the 21-22 school year. Paul has also been an active member in NAESP's state affiliate in Iowa. Paul has served on the Representative Council of the School Administrators of Iowa from 2007 to 2015, and from 2016 to 2017 served as president. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you very much for having me.
Is there anything more you would like to share that our audience can get to know you better?
I guess I would say being a member of SAI and NASP for the past 22 years has really allowed me to gain lifelong friendships with principals and also executive directors from all over the United States, which is probably the biggest plus of being part of these two organizations.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. As you know, Paul, October is the month we get to celebrate our building leaders. And I'm grateful to you for your work as a building leader and for your willingness to join me on It's Been Said podcast. So what qualities do you think, Paul, make the best leaders great?
I think probably the first one is being a good communicator, a person that's able to convey and exchange information or ideas with their staff, with parents, with students. Another one to go along with that is being a good listener, because the people that you're meeting with, communicating with, are going to have things to say. And so you want to make sure that you give them attention, that you're focused with them, looking them in the eye and not, doing things behind your desk or behind your computer. I think that being flexible, having flexibility to have the willingness to change or to compromise, because sometimes as administrators, we have things, we think we know exactly the road we want to take, but there might be a better road just, from listening in those conversations that we have with other people. I think empathy is very important, the ability to understand and share feelings that other people are experiencing, the humanness part of it. And then I think probably the last thing is being reflective, being able to look at what you've done. Sometimes our greatest intentions don't turn out that way. And so, we have to look back and say, okay, what did I do wrong? Or how could I have done that differently so it would have been beneficial for all? Or, and sometimes, I guess the last thing would be willing, own your mistakes. People will appreciate that, no one's perfect, and, just try to do better the next time.
Yeah, Paul, thank you. I appreciate your last comment there around owning your mistakes. All of what you said, very important, right? Communication, listening, being a reflecting on your work, empathy. But that idea of, as leaders, we too can make mistakes. And if we lead and own our mistakes, then learning from mistakes is what's most important. And so hopefully then that will help our teachers as well as students not be as concerned about making mistakes and learning from those mistakes.
I always told my staff members, and even with students when, I would have conversations with them, I said, if you're not trying something, willing to fail, there's no reason to try. And I said, by failure, we learn a lot from our failures. Sometimes we have bigger failures than what we want. But as long as we take ownership of those and try to improve upon those, I think that's the best thing you can do.
Yeah, so true. So true. What actions do leaders take to grow individually?
Well, I think probably the first one is being active with professional development. And I think right now, I think having to do a lot of reading, I think is very beneficial. Or like in our conversations that we had a little bit earlier, listening to things. If you don't have time to read, maybe you're sticking, something in your DVD or your, in your car or a CD or whatever, listening to something in your car on the way to work. I think being reflective is very important. One of the things I have found over the past 22 years of being an administrator is the networking part. I think networking is huge. I think you can get a lot of great ideas, information, suggestions from other administrators. And then I think the last thing I would say is being a member of your professional organizations. For me, it was School Administrators of Iowa and the National Association of Elementary School Principals. I've met great people, and I think that's how you can really grow professionally, just by knowing those other individuals.
Paul, how did you find the time? I hear often from building leaders or even, central office leaders, I just don't have the time to go to that meeting with the School Administrators of Iowa or the National Organization Conference. How did you find the time?
Well, I think you had to have the support. Looking at you, you were supportive of me running for president of the National Association. I couldn't have done that if I didn't have supportive superintendents behind me. I remember Galen Reinsmoen was my first superintendent, and he was the one that he got a call from SAI and said, we need a principal to be on a committee. Well, he said, Paul will do it. And he just put me on. Didn't ask me, just told me I was going to do it, which was fine. He said, you need to be gone. Don't worry about it. And so I think if you've created relationships in your building, people know that the building's not going to fall apart if you leave for a day or 2 days, whatever it happens to be. And I think it's also a balance, just like your professional life and your work life, your home life. You have to have that balance. And I think being able to get away and supporting and being a productive member of your organization is important. And superintendents do the same thing with their organizations, and I hope high school principals also do. And I just think that's the key. To be honest with you, I think the key is your superintendency being supportive of what you want to do.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. How do building leaders influence others, whether it's leaders or teachers? How can they influence, or how do they influence others?
Well, I think it's by their actions. They always say actions speak louder than words. Are they visible? Are they in the classrooms? Are they walking the hallways? Are they in the lunchroom saying hi to the kids, or out on playground duty, playing with, having that flag football game or pickup football game with the kids, some of the older kids? Leading by example. I think here again, developing those relationships. If you have the relationships built with those individuals, with the kids, with the staff members, they know you care. And if you ask them to do something, they're probably going to say, hey, I'll give it a try. May not be successful, but at least they gave it a try because you have that relationship built.
Yeah, thank you. We know how important culture is, right? So how do leaders create great places to work for both students as well as staff members?
I think it kind of comes back to building those relationships. You're not going to have a great place. You may have a good place, but I don't think you'll have a great school. I'm just going to use a school because that's what I've done for the last 22 years, unless you have relationships with students, with staff members, and also with parents. All three of those groups have to feel comfortable when they come in to talk to you or when they see you in the hallway, because there's going to be tough conversations. I remember as a principal in my first district, had a staff member that had a good relationship with her. but she was like 5 or 10 minutes late, consistently 3 days a week. And it was because she was a young mother and, I had kids. And showing empathy, I'd been down that road. I knew what she was going through. And I just said, what can I do to help you? And, she just talked to me about it. And she just kind of felt at ease. She got up 5 minutes earlier. She made it to work. It was an easy fix. But I think she just kind of needed to be, I don't want to say called on it, but know that it was visible and it could affect her down the road. And that I cared and I didn't want it to, be a negative thing for her with other staff members. Took care of it and no problems ever since then.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we know how important it is to have healthy school cultures. So how do building leaders build those emotionally healthy school cultures?
Well, I think staff members have to feel, and students have to feel comfortable with you. I think having an open door policy is very important. Showing empathy again when they do come in. When staff come in, a lot of times they may be to vent about something, nothing to do with school. Maybe something in their personal life, but they have to have somebody to vent to, and they're not always looking for a solution. Sometimes it's just like, I got to get this off my chest. And then as they talk about it, I have found quite often it's like, well, if I just do this, it'll take care of it. And you're just kind of sitting there listening and nodding your head. And, they say, thanks for listening and problem solved. Now, sometimes, I've run into it where they say, what do you think I should do? And I'll be, I'm always honest with them. Well, here's what I would do. May not work for you, but this is what I would do. And they feel, I would say 99% of the time, they feel good when they walk out of the office.
Yeah, perfect. So we know from research that people are getting out of administration. Fewer and fewer are considering going into being a principal. What advice would you have for teachers or educators considering entering the principalship?
Well, that's kind of a funny question because 2 years ago, my daughter-in-law, my son's a teacher, a special education teacher in elementary. My daughter-in-law is a middle school music teacher. And she said, I'm going to go back to school. I said, what for? And she said, I'm going to be the principal. I said, are you sure? And she goes, yep, that's what I want to do. So it's funny. We had this conversation and I just told her, I said, it's very important that you remember what it was like to be a classroom teacher. I said, being a principal is a totally different job, but you have to remember what your teachers are going through. And I said, the other thing that's probably one of the most important things is you have to find that work-home balance. If you don't do that from day one, you're going to cheat one or the other. And I said, people will understand if you have a family commitment because we're in the family business. And I always told all my teachers, I said, we may have a 3:45 deadline, but if you have to be somewhere to take care of a child at 3:30, just let me know and you can go because, family's first. That's our business. And so I would make sure I would tell anyone going into the business, don't let your family suffer because of your job. I said, you can find a balance. You may have to delegate some things, but you can find that happy balance and be successful.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that because building leaders, we know, you've lived it. I served as a building principal as well, but it's hours can be very time consuming, right? Most could be 7 a.m. till 10 at night or who knows what, right? So making sure that we tend to the needs of ourselves to make sure that we're continuing to be healthy and think of that as well. So that, my own health and well-being, but then of our families and those around us that we love, how important that is to have that leadership life fit so that we can stay effective for those that we serve in our buildings.
And I think principals and teachers, educators are doers. They want everyone to be happy and feel good. And who suffers the most is us as an individual. It's unfortunate, but that's just kind of the way our DNA is made up, I think.
Yeah. Appreciate that. So we know, Paul, that research has shown, second to the teacher in the classroom, the importance of building leadership on student achievement and so forth. So how can school administrators of Iowa and or district leadership support those building leaders who are in that daily role of that's so time consuming?
Well, one of the things that SAI has done is, they have a mentoring program, which I think is huge. I think that's very beneficial. I've mentored a couple principals. They appreciate it. They talked about the pros of having someone that they can, quickly pick up the phone and call. Again, networking is huge. I think having new principal groups get-togethers is something that's very beneficial, or could be beneficial, just because I feel that new principals it's a place where they can celebrate their successes and also get some ideas on the challenges that they're having to deal with, because somewhere down the road, everyone's going to probably be dealing with those same things. And so it's a good place to get ideas from veterans or from fellow new principals that they've already experienced it and they've dealt with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That, once again, networking.
Yes, it is. It's huge.
Yeah, leaning on each other, right? And learning from
right.
each other. That makes a huge difference. Yeah, for sure. In your role, Paul, as the NAESP president, you had a greater perspective of education on that national level. What kind of stands out to you?
It's a very easy question to answer, and it's that everyone's experiencing the same problems, just at different times. When I traveled all around the United States this past year, and they say, well, what's it like in Iowa? Or what do you hear from when you're out on the East Coast or out West? And I said, we're all experiencing the same thing day in and day out. Kids are kids. Yeah, you might have some bigger problems or locality, just certain problems that are only in a certain region of the United States. But most of the problems that principals are dealing with, whether you're in Alaska or Florida or Iowa, they're all the same. And it's just kind of like, when do they hit and how do you deal with them? That was probably one of the nicest things in the past, I want to say 9 or 10 years, as being a state rep for NASP, and then also being on the board. I have principals from every state that I can call and say, have you dealt with this? Or how did you deal with this? Whether it's a student issue, a parent issue, a district issue, whatever. And it's just so nice to be able to make, 4 or 5 phone calls in a matter of, 25, 30 minutes and have those perspectives. And usually you hear pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. Were there some themes for challenges that you saw or heard about across the nation?
I would say after COVID, having kids coming back to school, there were different kids coming back. Being home, I think that was advantageous in the respect of parents saw what we dealt with on a daily basis and how much they appreciated what educators were doing. I think sometimes that's kind of been forgotten already. But the just kids coming back and starting out school without any preschool or knowing how to share, especially the younger kids, I heard a lot about just behaving and sharing and how to ask for things, manners. They just said, principal said, I've had more problems with younger kids than I have my older kids. And it's usually the other way around. So yeah. I would say that was probably the most noticeable across the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So after gaining a greater national perspective, is there anything that you would emphasize about education in your home state of Iowa?
Well, we hit upon this a little bit. Networking. I think networking is probably the most important thing a young administrator or an old administrator can do, a veteran administrator. And, you can do it like in West Des Moines. I was fortunate enough to have 7 other elementary principals that I could bounce ideas off of, and they were all great. And and it changed during my 7 years there, but we were always a close knit group, and were able to have good conversations. So I think that was very important. You run into, like, my first district, it was one elementary principal, one high school principal, and a superintendent, and that's a little bit different because all 3 of those worlds are different. And if the superintendent did not have elementary background knowledge, then he couldn't help as much the high school or the elementary. If he had high school, vice versa. So I think the networking at the local level, and when I say local, it could be a district or also, your AEA. Get to know some of those other principals in your AEA. At the state level, here again, when I was a state rep, I reached out to all the AEAs and found people that could help me be strong, help with membership. And so I got to know them on a personal basis, which was another more networking. And then also, like I said earlier, at the national level, that's huge. It's fun to hear, how other people are dealing with things and reaffirming what you're doing. So, and, you talked earlier about principals leaving the profession. It's crazy that over 50%, I read an article not too long ago, but over 50% of the new principals in the first 5 years are leaving the profession. And I'm just like, that's sad, because it's a great profession. I don't think you could ask for a better profession, but some of the working conditions and compensation and supports are not there for everyone. And I think that's one of the focuses that we really have to do in the state of Iowa, to make sure that we're doing that for all of our principals. And, just have to work together. I don't think it's anybody not doing something on purpose. I just think that, we just have to communicate, and, people need to say, hey, I need this, or can you do this for me? And you have to be willing to ask. Don't suffer through it. Find a solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I do, NAESP just put out the most recent survey around high school principals and the percent leaving the profession. And yeah, it definitely is something that we need to continue to watch and have conversations about. How can we retain our quality of our leadership? Because we know how important that is, as well as then how can we attract people to the profession? And I know that we also have the educator shortage. So as fewer and fewer people are going into education, that also then impacts the pipeline, right, for the leadership piece too. So,
right. When I started out, it was not uncommon for us to have, 100, 150 applications for an elementary teaching position. Now, sometimes it's 15 or 20. So it's really crazy how much it's changed with the number of people going into education.
Yeah. Yeah. So we definitely need to focus on that as a state for sure. And as a nation.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Paul, to wrap up our time together, SAI annual conference keynoter Greg Bell reminded us to adopt the mindset of what's going well. So considering that notion, what's something that's going well you wish to convey to our listeners?
Well, I think we have great individuals in our profession. I think that the administrators across the state of Iowa and across our nation want what is best for students and staff every day. I think they wake up, they go to bed thinking, what can I do better tomorrow to make life easier or better for the people in my school community? I think from what I've seen, I think people are innovative. I think the principals are caring, and I think they'll do whatever it takes to move their school forward. And I don't think you can ask more than that from any individual.
Yeah, well, thank you, Paul. I'm really grateful for you having stepped up years ago to serve as a building leader, and to all of our building leaders in the state of Iowa as we celebrate them this month. And not only in the month, we just take this month, right, to do a special celebration, but as the whole entire school year, to have great people who are serving students, families, and their communities. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us today and for helping us shine a spotlight on the great work that's happening every day from our building leaders.
Thank you very much for having me, and wishing all the principals out there a great Principals Month of October.
Thanks again to Paul for his insight and reminders of the joys of the profession. If you're looking to grow in your role, to be able to think big and adapt quickly, translate strategy into meaningful work, and coach people to higher performance, join SAI Professional Learning Director Dana Schoen and your colleagues for a 2-day in-person workshop December 8th and 9th on the 4 essential roles of leadership. Sign up on the SAI website using the events link. Join us next month when we welcome Superintendent Joe Studding and Director of Curriculum and Instruction Bernie Bruskern from North Scott, who will revisit their standing room only SAI annual conference session on developing a cohesive leadership team.